welcome. I am Alexis Badenmare. I'm the political director of the Organic Consumers Association, and I'm bringing you today a wonderful program from a new project, Regeneration Health International. And I have with us today, I have my absolute heroes, Zen Honeycutt of Moms Across America. She's the author of Unstoppable: Transforming Sickness and Struggle into Triumph, Empowerment, and a Celebration of Community. And Dr. Michelle Perro, she's the author of What's Making Our Children Sick: How Industrial Food is Causing an Epidemic of Chronic Illness and What Parents and Doctors Can Do About It. And finally, scientist Stephanie Seneff. She is the author of Toxic Legacy: How the Weed Killer Glyphosate is Destroying Our Health and the Environment. So, this is part two of a conversation we started on World Food Day when Regeneration International did its worldwide 24-hour World Food Day People's Food Summit broadcast. And we were talking about a recent study that Zen and Moms Across America did to test school lunches in the United States to see what sorts of pesticides, toxins, and heavy metals are in them. So we're going to get back into the details of what Zen and Moms Across America found in that study, but we're also going to get the expertise that Stephanie and Michelle, our two doctors, our doctor and scientists, have to offer about what we can do to heal from these exposures, how we can bring our kids back into good health by essentially an organic diet. That's the first step. But we're going to hear the whys and hows about detoxing from the things that are in school lunches and in so many processed and industrial produced foods. So let's start with Zen. For anybody who didn't see the first broadcast, just give us a brief summary of what you did with this study, and then we'll go to Drs. Perro and Seneff to get them to weigh in.
Great. Thank you very much, Alexis. And it's wonderful to be here with Stephanie and Michelle. And I'm just going to share real quick the original article so that in case anybody has not yet seen it, this is the report on the National School Lunch Testing for Glyphosate, which is in Roundup, and also its breakdown AMPA, which is even more toxic than glyphosate. Pesticides, all 220 different pesticides, 4 different heavy metals. It was about 108, I think, hormones and veterinary drugs and nutrients. And to just summarize quickly at the beginning of this episode that we have today, 95.3% of the school lunch items contained carcinogenic, endocrine disrupting, and liver disease causing glyphosate. 74% of the samples contained at least one of 29 harmful pesticides. 4 veterinary drugs and hormones, such as the ones that make cows lactate more, right? Those types of steroids and drugs were found in 9 school lunch samples at levels up to 130, basically parts per billion. And the lab was appalled by that. They had not ever seen levels that high before. 100% of the school lunch samples contained heavy metals at levels up to 6,293 times higher than what the EPA's maximum levels allow in drinking water. So although the levels don't look high at first glance, when you compare them to the levels that are allowed in drinking water, they are quite high. Also, the majority of the samples were abysmally low in nutrients. So this is the original article, and it's found on momsacrossamerica.org under the blog. And we want to talk more about this today and what we can do about all of this. And it's something that has been weighing heavily on our minds. We have a new article out called What You Can Do. I'll try to show that one as well. And we want people to take action as well around this. And we also want to discuss, what we can do in the meantime. So I'm so glad to have Stephanie back and Dr. Perro back to talk about this. And this is the article, What Can We Do About Toxic School Lunches? And just as a reminder, 30 million GMO meals are served. That's breakfast and lunch. They're served each day to our children. And for a large number of them, these meals are the only meals that they receive each day. And in this article, we can get into this more, and we'll have more conversation. But I give an example. We give an example of what you can, what the food costs if you were to switch over to organic food. And, for about $30 a week, you can have very good options. I mean, some of these are really like dinners rather than just lunches. You can have very good options for organic school meals. And if you want to find out how to budget better, here's an example of some of the things that you can take out of your, off your grocery list in order to be able to budget in the organic schools, like ice cream sandwiches or cookies or chips or soda. I mean, our kids really do not need to be consuming these types of foods. So, we'd like to talk more about that as well. And then, of course, we have a letter sent to our government on the article to the USDA and the our senators and representatives. So we also hope you'll share this article with your school principal, your food director, and the EPA. I mean, sorry, the PTA, and let them know about what's happening. We really need to speak up, and it's really, it's only going to happen with people, like us getting together and talking about it and sharing this type of conversation. So I'm really glad to be able to hear today to talk further about this.
Yeah, it's so fantastic. I mean, your study is amazing, but it's so exciting to be able to have Dr. Pero and Dr. Seneff here to unpack this for us. So I'd like to start with Dr. Pero as an experienced pediatrician with a lot of experience in healing kids through nutrition. What's the big picture here? I mean, I think I know that most of our listeners and viewers are way beyond this point, but there are a lot of us who just don't see the importance of what we eat to our health. So looking at this study, Dr. Pero, how significant is this, that this is the quality of school lunches?
Of course, and as we said in the last episode, I'm so blown away by this study and just equally horrified that moms had to yet again take it up, but it is moms that are going to fix it too. So this is a solutions-based group of folks here, the new MDs. But we talked about the pesticides last week. That was absolutely horrific. But what I found maybe even more horrific were that 100% of those meals had heavy metals. And I was hoping we can address that, those heavy metals that were found, and they were found in 6,000 times what they should be. There's no safe limit of heavy metals, by the way. We say, for example, you could have lead 10 micrograms per milliliter in your blood. That's a random number. You shouldn't have any lead in your blood, but we do make these allowances. I'd like to make one point about nutrition. I think about 1/3 of the world's population is iron deficient, and that's mostly in the 3-month-old to 6-year-old age group. That's kids. What we also know that cadmium, which is a heavy metal that was found in those school lunches, induces iron deficiency. And we also know that iron deficiency increases susceptibility to lead, which was also found not in those meals, and it's also found in pesticides like Roundup. So we now are allowing our children, many of them are iron deficient because of what happens at home, exposed to heavy metals, increased amounts of heavy metal uptake because kids are not, as detoxificationally speaking, as robust as adults. And they have, among many disorders, neurocognitive effects. They are neurotoxins. They affect brain function. And kids who are lead toxic, for example, have smaller prefrontal cortex areas. That's where your abstract thinking comes in, and more violent behavior and antisocial behavior. It's a neurologic mess. And we've been dealing with lead toxicity in the US, I think, since 1917, actually. And we didn't ban it till 1972 when we said no more lead in the paint. So these things are absolutely stunning. And I'll pass it over to my friend and colleague, Stephanie, to weigh in from the scientific perspective. And then we will be able to get into what parents can do, because every parent should be shocked, horrified, and catapulted to action. So Stephanie, I'll turn it over to you. Your thoughts.
Yes, well, thank you. And thank you so much, Zen, for doing this work. It is so important. And it really gives us an opportunity to get this message out to the moms, and to get the moms to get it out to the PTA members and get action, because I think it's such a tremendous opportunity that the government has here to make a difference in the health of the children of this nation, which are so important for the future, by simply making sure that that one meal that they get in the middle of the day is extremely healthy. I mean, they really would spend money so wisely to increase the cost of the school lunch, and to subsidize it even at the federal level across the country. I mean, I think these would be wonderful things to do to assure that those kids get a really healthy meal at lunchtime at school. It's such a tremendous opportunity here. And instead, they do the exact opposite. They don't worry about all the toxic chemicals in the foods, the nutritional deficiencies. They try to make it as cheap as possible. It's the complete wrong answer to the problem we face right now with our children's health. And I completely agree with you about the iron. I'm well aware of the issues with anemia. You know, anemia is an epidemic now because of iron deficiency, really across the globe. And cadmium and arsenic, I mean, those are both present in these foods, along with the glyphosate. There's a paper that just came out from 2022 from a study in Taiwan, where they showed that cadmium, arsenic, and glyphosate were synergistically toxic to destroy the kidneys. It was a study on kidney failure connected to those three. So kidney failure is not a pleasant thing that you want to have, and certainly not to start off a young child getting exposed to these chemicals that can lead to something as serious as that. So the toxic metals, the deficiencies in, I suspect there's tremendous deficiencies in basic micronutrients, like, you know, the B vitamins, all the vitamins and minerals being deficient in the food. It's so important to make sure the children get adequate amounts of these things, and it's just not happening.
And you bring up a good point, Stephanie, that they're not testing synergistic effects. Right. But that study that you just mentioned, you know, did. And, you know, there's many other harmful, there were 29 other harmful pesticides in addition to glyphosate in there. You know, what's happening? We all know that when you put vinegar and baking soda together, something different happens, right? And that's not being tested with what's going on in our school lunches. So that's
a very good point with respect to glyphosate, because glyphosate disrupts the liver's ability to detoxify a lot of the other chemicals that they're being exposed to, which makes those chemicals more toxic.
And not only that, as we touched upon at the last show, is that glyphosate, we know, affects the microbiome and the action as an antibiotic. And we know that some of the microbes are responsible for making those B vitamins. And so right. Because when the microbiome is been hindered and impacted, and children have not enough microbes, it's too homogeneous and their numbers are lowered, they can't even make the vitamins that their microbes produce. So they're already at those B deficient levels. They're deficient, and then they're deficient with their organic metals like manganese. And manganese you need for brain function, and we're having an epidemic of neurocognitive challenges in kids. You don't want too much manganese, but you need enough manganese. And we know glyphosate, and Stephanie, gosh, you could speak on this probably a few hours, selectively loves manganese. And who produces manganese? Lactobacilli, those beneficial bugs in your gut, which glyphosate alters. And we know that from papers back in 2013 out of the veterinarian literature, Dr. Monica Kruger, as well as others. So you see that the synergism that we're referred to really is important between the pesticides and the heavy metals. And we didn't even cover everything that you, mom, CSI agent, uncovered in that study.
Yeah, well, I remember too some of the original papers that I looked at were from Dr. Stephanie Seneff and Anthony Samsel, showing really that glyphosate increases the harmful impact of the other environmental toxins in the environment. That's a major point. Like, if we didn't have glyphosate in our bodies from all this food that we're eating every day, then maybe these other harmful toxins wouldn't be as impactful. And I think that's a major point that a lot of people, you know, don't realize, that it's increasing the harmful impact of all these other environmental toxins as well. And, you know, just extremely concerned about that. So we look at what's going on in these lunches, and, you know, these low, can you address a little bit more? Why is it so important to have these minerals, having low levels of minerals, you know, in the foods, like, you know, very low levels of copper, for instance? My understanding is that you have to have a good balance between copper and zinc, and children with autism do not. Like, that's a telltale sign. Is that true, Dr. Pero or Dr. Stephanie? Do you see like imbalances of copper and zinc in children. And so that the school lunches have very low copper, I would be thinking, hello, we should be looking at this, especially since we have an autism epidemic. Wouldn't you think?
Absolutely. And it's true. You're spot on, Zen, that kids on the spectrum, which is now affecting 1 in 30 children, and according to Dr. Seneff, by 2025, it might be 1 in 2. And I
2032.
2032. Yep.
and I wouldn't be surprised if that actually comes to fruition. I certainly hope not. I think we can reverse this. But the copper and zinc live in harmony, and kids on the spectrum can develop something called cryptopyluria, where they have an imbalance, producing all kinds of untoward health effects. And so we don't have enough copper. We don't have enough zinc either. Kids are also zinc deficient, and we know those bivalent metals are bound up by glyphosate, among other things. And so you need zinc to run maybe 200 to 250 reactions in your brain alone, not to mention immune function and other important elements of zinc. So, and copper is needed for thyroid function and liver function. And so these things need to be in balance. It would be better to get it in our food rather than supplementing, because foods are the perfect form of eating these nutritious minerals rather than giving a supplement. Because when you give zinc supplements, you have to make sure there's copper in there. So you see, it's better in the food. Taking these beneficial minerals, it's always better in the food over the supplementation. So I hope I addressed that. But indeed, you are correct. And you don't want too much of these metals, but you don't want too little either.
Right. And then the other thing is with glyphosate, that glyphosate actually disrupts the whole system of transport of all these minerals throughout the body. The body has developed very sophisticated mechanisms for providing special molecules like heme that can carry iron, and molecules that can carry manganese. And these molecules are being disrupted by the glyphosate so that the mineral becomes simultaneously toxic and deficient. And I think this is true for manganese, for iron, possibly for zinc, but the manganese and iron in particular. In fact, Anthony Samsel and I wrote a whole paper on manganese, and you are absolutely right about the lactobacillus. They critically depend on manganese to be healthy. Glyphosate is strongly chelates it, making it unavailable. And then furthermore, the manganese normally goes to the liver, and then the liver ships it out through the bile acids back to the gut. There's a whole system of and then distributing it to the body via the bloodstream. And the liver actually ends up getting the manganese trapped in the liver and in the gallbladder because it can't be released through the bile acids. And then the manganese travels up the nerve system, the vagus nerve, goes up to the brain stem and causes manganese toxicity in the nerves at the brain stem. And meanwhile, manganese deficiency throughout the body because it's not being distributed the normal way. And I think this is a very important point because people don't realize how fancy the system is. These metals are all toxic. They can be toxic if they're not properly couched in protective mechanisms that the biology has developed. But those mechanisms get disrupted by glyphosate. So I think that's a very important point. Iron and manganese are both, I think, throughout, both toxic and deficient at the same time. For that reason.
That's a huge point. Did you say that lactobacillus is very important on manganese? Can you describe why that's important? I mean, lactobacillus, maybe some people don't understand the importance of that bacteria beneficial bacteria, right, in the gut.
Oh, it's the dominant bacterium in the gut, in the infant gut. Lactobacillus is really king. That's the one that really needs to flourish. It processes the milk. It actually provides special enzymes that the human cells don't possess to help to break down casein in milk, the protein, the milk protein. A lot of kids have casein sensitivity. They can't drink milk. I suspect that's partly due to lactobacillus being deficient in the gut. And once the lactobacillus are killed off by the glyphosate, because they have that strong dependency on manganese, which glyphosate holds onto and won't let go in the gut. It won't let them get access to the manganese.
Can you introduce lactobacillus in a supplement form and sort of sort that situation out?
That's probably a good one for Michelle, because she probably knows the pitfalls there.
I am the queen of the microbes.
Good.
On bugs, I love bugs and the microbiome. So briefly, the baby inherits a microbiome from mom, right? So mom is a stewardess of the baby's microbiome, and that comes from the vaginal area as well as its tush. But for babies that are C-section, they acquire the microbiome to look more like the surgical suite than mom. And through breastfeeding, breast milk is not sterile. And there's a whole bunch of microbes in the breast milk that baby needs. So after about 3 months of feeding, it takes about 3 months, the baby can have a microbiome that looks more like mom, dad, the family dog, right? Licking the baby's face, dad's holding the baby, skin to skin matters, all that. After about 800 and some odd days, the microbiome is set. You can't really alter your microbiome after about age 3. Now, some literature says through supplementation with diet, that might be a 20 to 30% wiggle room where we can acquire these new organisms in our gut, but it's really hard. One dose of antibiotics, like amoxicillin for an ear infection, can take up to 6 months to recover your microbiome. So, like doom and gloom, no way. We can supplement lactobacilli through supplementation with probiotics for sure, through fermented foods. I'm a big fan of the ferments, but some kids need more, and they need lactobacillus supplementation. It's pretty affordable. You have to make sure that we give the ones that children need. There are different strains. Strains matter. I tend to focus on rhamnosus, GG, Kazai, and along with bifidobacteria, like Bifidobacteria infantis and a few others. And they don't need a lot of colonies, maybe 1 billion colonies. And if you add it into their dairy, assuming they're not dairy intolerant, like half of the American kids now, putting it in dairy really helps the uptake. And maybe some of them will take residence, those other microbes. And those microbes keep the gut healthy, because they can change. Not only do they produce those vitamins, as we mentioned, and the breakdown of proteins, as Stephanie referred to, but they also change the pH of the stool, particularly Bifidobacterium. Bifido is key for infants. That change in the pH can create a less hospitable environment for bad bugs to grow. It really protects baby. So those bugs, that's part of their immune function, is just by this change in pH, making it more acidic through bifidobacteria. So these bugs acquire through supplementation, acquire through diet and fermented foods, and trying to avoid the insults through antimicrobials such as antibiotics and glyphosate. That was a long answer. Sorry for that.
That's a great answer.
You can increase the lactobacillus in the gut. And this is something I would have loved to have known the first year of my first son's life, who was allergic to milk. And I all of a sudden couldn't have pizza or cheese or, any kind of milk. And he was crying a lot because his gut was in pain. He had experienced exposure to glyphosate and also vaccines, which we know, can contain glyphosate from our previous testing. So, that was something that was baffling to me, because when I was a child, I was not allergic to milk. We had milk from the cow from the farm up the street. I didn't know anybody who was allergic to milk. I didn't know anybody who was allergic to anything except for maybe one kid that was allergic to peanuts. So all of a sudden now, every single one of my friends had a child, practically everyone, with allergic to something, pepper or strawberries or apples, like 18-month-old babies allergic to apples, things like that. It was really baffling. So now what you're saying is, if I understand this properly, that probably glyphosate is chelating manganese, which decreases the lactobacillus in the gut, and then has the gut microbiome messed up in such a way that they then have things like milk allergies. Is that
right? And in fact, I can say a little bit more about the science behind that, because the proteins don't get broken down. Especially the ones that have a lot of protein, that's casein and gluten. We have all the gluten intolerance these days. And that you have these peptide sequences that stick around. They don't get broken down because you don't have the enzymes from the lactobacillus. And then those are foreign peptides that the immune cells don't like. They understand, oh, this is a human protein, no problem. But when they see something that's not a human, they get upset and they produce antibodies. And then those antibodies can start attacking the tissues through molecular mimicry. And the other thing I wanted to say,
looks like, hang on a second, and that looks like rashes.
Yes,
right?
all these different allergies and autoimmune diseases, it's, and of course, celiac intolerance, celiac disease, gluten intolerance, that's all connected to these peptides that don't get broken down because the lactobacillus are being killed off by the glyphosate. And then the other thing with the pH, I'm glad you mentioned the pH, because that's very interesting. And I have a lot to say about the pH in my chapter in my book on the gut. I have a whole chapter on glyphosate in the gut. It was a really fascinating topic that I spent a long time studying to put together that chapter, but it was quite interesting because I found that the pH of the gut overall in the population has been going up over time. The kids, when they looked at kids in the 1920s versus 1970s versus today, the pH keeps going up
and by that, do you mean acidic?
colon.
Do you mean more
basic? Too basic.
Oh,
too basic. And
basic.
That's where she mentioned that these microbes that are healthy microbes make it more acidic. So it's too basic. And when the pH gets too high, that is to say too basic, then these microbes don't thrive. The ones that, for example, make the butyrate. The butyrate production goes way down. Butyrate and acetate and propionate are these short-chain fatty acids that are produced by the bacteria by breaking down things like cellulose. I mean, the parts that our cells don't know how to digest, the guts in the bacteria in the colon, break them down, turn them into very useful short-chain fatty acids. And the colon, the cells that line the colon, they love butyrate. That's their favorite food. And it's produced by the gut microbes, and it feeds the colon, the lining of the colon, to keep it healthy. So when there's not enough butyrate, those cells get sick, and you end up with issues with irritable bowel syndrome, and you have an inflammatory bowel, and you can end up eventually with colon cancer.
And Stephanie, that's an excellent point. I would add that kids on the spectrum, because how can we not talk about autism, have very low levels of this butyrate. That butyrate is key for neurologic function, because remember, there's that gut-brain axis, the gut-brain microbiome axis, and those products from breakdown of those microbes travel up through the bloodstream and through the vagus nerve, and they're modifiers, and they affect brain function, and they cross the blood-brain barrier. So when 100 years ago, I saw fecal slides from a Scottish pathologist named Dr. Logan, and babies who are at that time were just, their fecal smears were just filled with bifidobacteria. The bifido makes butyric acid. They are responsible for that. Compared to babies now, they have a paucity of bifidobacteria. It's called Bifidobacteria infantis. So if we can do anything for moms and babies, is you supplement mom before, during, and after pregnancy with these strains of probiotics, and I give them to babies, especially babies who might be struggling. And may I also add to Stephanie's excellent point and to your questions, and that so many kids now have leaky gut. That
my kids had all three of them.
Proteins, I mean, I think 90% of the kids I see now have leaky gut. Those proteins cross before they're incompletely broken down.
There you go.
And then the immune system sees them because they're large molecules, 7, 8 amino acids. They're too long. And then we see them as foreign invaders, and we make an immune response. An elevated immune response is the definition of inflammation. And that chronic inflammation sitting there in kids can make tummy aches, constipation, mood changes, bloating, gassiness, all types of issues. And if the kids are constipated, like a third of children are constipated, no pooping, no detoxing. So if we get back to all those heavy metals that they're eating at school, they're not pooping, their tummies are bloated and they're gassy. They sit. There's something called your enterohepatic circulation. They sit in there, they get reabsorbed, go back right into your liver circulation. So if that's what happens when you're not pooping, things keep getting reabsorbed, and kids who are constipated, their poops are pale brown because so much has been reabsorbed back up. It should be a nice dark brown, healthy color. So this is an idea of, we're trying to discuss here biologic systems and why this is so important, going back to your studies and why this is so important.
Well, I just love that you're mentioning these symptoms, because I want moms to understand that when there's a rash happening, the inflammation, the rash, that's your body's way of communicating. It's like the red blinking light at a stop sign. This is your body's way of communicating that there's something going on in the gut that you need to address. It's not just, let's slap a cream on that rash and make sure it goes away. No, why is that inflammation happening? Why is that rash happening? Let's get to what's going into your child's gut. And let's look at, are you feeding them dairy or sugar or, foods with heavy metals and pesticides and glyphosate in it? And if you eliminate that, the studies are showing within 1 to 2 weeks, you can eliminate, 60% to 100% of those pesticides and things that are coming out of the urine, the detectable levels. And so I just want moms to know what the symptoms are. You just mentioned all those behavioral issues you just mentioned. That's not your kid necessarily just trying to be a brat. That's for kids saying, there's something going on in my gut. When my son was screaming and waking up every hour and wanting to breastfeed when he was a baby, and his poop was green and, stringy, and like it did not look like normal baby poop. That was the body's way of communicating there's something going on here and let's address it. And that's why I love the new MDs, moms, doctors, and scientists working together, because I think when moms want to understand this. Like I just had another mom on our Moms Connect calls on Monday night. She said that, before she had her baby, she was up every night researching what type of medicines or vaccines or like things to, administer to her baby. And that's what moms do. We research, but we need the science, and we need to talk to our doctors, and we need to have doctors that are willing to listen. And when I hear Stephanie explain the manganese issue and the lactobacillus, I mean, that's a huge, I don't know about you, but that's a huge light bulb that goes off in my head. I'm like, wow, why isn't there some kind of conference where doctors are learning this? And then the first thing they do is test the kids for a manganese deficiency. Like why isn't mineral testing at the top of the list of what doctors do? Is that happening, Michelle? Do doctors test for minerals and deficiencies?
Nope, they don't, because they are not trained in nutritional science. Nutritional science is poo-pooed. It's not being real science as compared to pharmaceutical science. So because we get a year of pharmacy, we get 2 hours of nutrition. It's changed a little bit. I think some schools give a week with a year of nutrition and then a year of pharmaceuticals. So we are trained in symptom-based pharmaceutical approaches to health. Not what real health looks like. What we're discussing is nutrition-based, food-forward, regenerative, organic, non-GMO, non-chemical input, non-heavy metal, non-veterinarian drug-laden children. And that's why we're here, because what we're doing in the clinic is not what people need. So what we need are regenerative doctors. And this regenerative healthcare team includes moms, scientists, activists, farmers, educators, and legislators. That's what the medical team looks like. And the farmer and the scientist and the mom has to be part of our team. I'll give you my piece. And we have to include holistic practitioners. And part of the testing should be nutritional testing, because you can get it in holistic clinics. Many labs do it. Genova, Great Plains Lab. There are many who will test for nutrition.
And it's not expensive. It's like $27 a sample, folks. Yeah, it's not expensive. It's not expensive.
Your Western doc can do it through Quest or LabCorp. Those are the most common in the US. But they order plasma levels. But where you need is red blood cell levels of certain minerals like zinc and magnesium. If your doctor, and your insurance will pay for it, orders magnesium and zinc, and you see those are low, you can almost guess that the other nutrients are going to be low too. And they don't have the testing for a lot of the other ones. You can get some B12 there. Sometimes you can get some nutritional panels, but they're not looking at it the right way. We have to.
Okay. So you're mentioning nutrient testing in blood. I'm sorry. I mentioned nutrient testing in food. So that was the $27. Yeah. The nutrient testing in blood, I'm sure, is more expensive.
Oh, it's more expensive. You can do it, and insurance will cover it, but your practitioner, your physician has to order the right one and look at, for example, zinc levels. And when I check kids, they're low. We can look at iron. You look at ferritin, where it stores iron, low. We can look at lead levels. You can do a finger stick in children and measure lead levels through something called FEP, or measure their lead levels. That's a blood test. They can be high. Some of them you can measure in urine. You can do it. But a lot of these, and you can measure heavy metals too. But sometimes we have to provoke the heavy metals to draw them out. And that's a whole nother.
Can we talk more about that? Can we talk more about the detoxing of the heavy metals? Can we get into that?
Oh, we can. Yes, we can. Detoxing heavy metals. It's a big conversation. Why is that? Because we want to make sure before you ever try and clear heavy metals from a kid that everything else is working. Their leaky guts are better. They have a robust microbiome. You've restored other nutrients, particularly iron, to kind of offset the heavy metals. And you open their detox pathways with their diet, including good detoxification herbs like dandelion, cilantro, greens, all the greens, microgreens, sprouts, lots of sprouts, broccoli sprouts, really good for our phase 2 detox of the liver. So we try and do that. Now, avoidance is number one, lowering the input. So you have to, for example, with arsenic, the way you treat arsenic toxicity is stop eating it, and the arsenic will clear. But the other heavy metals deposit. like in bone, in brain,
Like lead,
lymph,
like lead, right?
like lead. So
Yeah.
we have to draw those out, and those get a bit harder to draw out. And so you can use binders like EDTA. You can get those over the counter. You can use zeolite. Zeolite is a natural substance of the earth, but many zeolites are contaminated with heavy metals. So you have to find one that's clean. It's not so easy because I'm going to a zeolite lab next month to look at this one product that is supposedly clean, and a pharmacist figured out how to do that. We'll have to do a follow up. But what can parents do? Like give up? No, binders like fiber, like apple pectin fiber. Propylmanin will bind up, and propylmanin will also bind mold. Charcoal, like takasumi, which is burnt down bamboo. There's products that have burnt down coconut shell, assuming your kid's not sensitive to coconut, but coconut, I like coconut for kids. You give those binders. I try not to do some of them like bentonite clay and others because they cause constipation. It gets a little tricky. So
You can bathe in bentonite clay instead, right?
You can bathe it, and we're going to get to. I'm glad you said that. So I would prefer if parents really want, and I say parents because please, Dad, step up. If parents want to get into this, better to work with a holistic practitioner. But I must give a plug for sweating. Children need to get off their devices and go sweat, because sweating and your skin is a great absorptive and excretory organ. You will excrete heavy metals in the skin, and then rinse off. Like kids can sweat again. Remember, have I seen a kid sweating anymore? I don't know. Anyway, get the sweating. We do saunas. I don't put 4-year-olds in saunas. Okay, sauna is great for detoxing, and Epsom salt baths. And that's magnesium sulfate. And kids are magnesium deficient. So if you put a little baking soda in there, super good. You put an Epsom salt bath, soak them 15, 20 minutes. Kids love baths. They're calming. You could throw a little lavender essential oil in there to make it a very nice spa treatment. But then make sure they rinse off afterwards. Otherwise, they will reabsorb up the toxics.
Well, the bentonite clay in the Epsom salt bath, can you add that in to help take out?
I probably wouldn't, because the bentonite might bind up the mag sulfate.
Oh, okay.
Oh dear.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's true. I might have just made that up. So I'm going to have to come back next time and make sure I didn't just make that up.
Okay.
But those things bind up. So some mom out there's a mom detective out there who's going to look that up and say, that's not right, Dr. Barrow.
But you're saying it could do that.
She thinks it might.
So it's best to keep them separate, is what you're saying. The bentonite clay separate from the Epsom salts.
I would think, but I've used bentonite clay like for wounds and stings and bug bites. I've used clay to put on there, bentonite clay. And we use it. I've used it as a binder, but it sure is constipating. So I'm super careful with it.
Okay. Yeah. We don't need more constipation. I see constipation on one of these biomedical healing pages, and Parents Against Miralax, that page. If you have not checked out Parents Against Miralax, please do. And every day they're talking about the constipation in kids for 7 days, not going to the bathroom. I mean, there is an epidemic of constipation going on in our kids. And I think it's primarily linked to, of course, glyphosate destroying the beneficial gut bacteria and the gut's ability to break down the food, right? And to, as you just mentioned, process these large proteins. And so it builds up. And I mean, these kids are suffering, and their behavior is, it's awful. And so the whole family is struggling. Their relationships are struggling. The marriages are struggling. It's a very high percentage of families that get divorced because primarily because they have a child with special needs. So it's really affecting our whole society. And I can't even, how many times I've posted the same information about how to prevent, constipation by eating healthy and getting glyphosate out of your diet and eating more, fibers and, all of that. It's really a problem. And so I'm just waiting for the day when more doctors are educated, about this issue from the science that people like Stephanie are pulling together, and the work that Regeneration International is putting out with Regeneration Health. That's what we need out there. That's what we should be broadcast on TV, not all this bad news.
Well, the glyphosate is quite interesting with respect to constipation. And it's something I talked about in my book. Peristalsis, which is the movement, the muscle movement to push the food through. depends upon serotonin. Serotonin activates the peristalsis process, and serotonin is a product. It basically comes out of the shikimate pathway. So tryptophan is converted into serotonin in the gut. Serotonin is mostly made in the gut from the tryptophan, which is produced by the bacteria using the shikimate pathway, which glyphosate disrupts. So you have a deficiency in tryptophan. It's actually the first article that Anthony and I wrote about glyphosate. We talked about this. The serotonin deficiency in the gut is a consequence of glyphosate disrupting that shikimate pathway in the gut microbes. And so with inadequate serotonin, you don't have enough peristalsis and you get constipation.
Wow. I did not remember that. And without serotonin, you're also not satisfied and happy.
That's right. The serotonin deficiency can cause both obesity and autism and mood, depression. Basically, serotonin is a feel good hormone in the brain.
Yeah, with 1 out of 5 people now having mental illness, you would think the government would be on top of how to, actually prevent depression. I mean, because we're talking about 1 out of 5 people. That's your policeman next to you, or the person driving in the car next to you, or your pilot, or a politician, your teachers, right? Your neighbors. That's a lot of mentally ill people that are affecting this country, and we see that in the news.
And they're taking these selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs, which is really messing things up badly.
Well, they're connected to homicide and suicide and mass violence.
I think so. I think SSRIs are so clear in connection with these shootouts that are happening, which we never used to see. This sort of crazy behavior that ordinarily you would think it can't happen. Somebody just go in and start shooting kids. I mean, it's unbelievable that they get into that state of rage. And I think it has related to the serotonin, the combination of the glyphosate suppressing serotonin and then taking these SSRI inhibitors, which prevent the serotonin from being taken back up again. They leave it in the synapse longer because of that, but you don't have enough serotonin to go around. And so when you come off the drug, all of a sudden you've got a severe serotonin deficiency that causes this bizarre behavior.
Yes. And that 80% of your serotonin is made in the gut. And so you're not making the serotonin, the calming neurotransmitter. And we have all these kids on these SSRIs. There are physicians prescribing infants and 1-year-olds SSRIs. Though we have 3-year-olds on drugs that are used for psychosis, like Risperdal and other drugs like that we are on this drug craze. What we spend on drugs, if we shifted that to nutrition, we could actually solve the problem and get these kids off the pharmaceuticals. Children are not born with a deficiency of pharmaceuticals. Let's be clear. So what we need to do is create that shift. And again, we're talking about the microbes. And thank you for bringing that up about the shikimate pathway. That is why it's so important. All those aromatic amino acids, you need to make neurotransmitters, but you also need them to make certain hormones like thyroid hormone and other hormones. Right. And what are we having is we have an epidemic of people. First it was just women. Now it's both men and women with hypothyroidism, with thyroid deficiencies, as well as autoimmune thyroid disease, Hashimoto's and Graves'. So, and I saw a 9-year-old boy with Hashimoto's thyroiditis 20 years ago. That was unheard of. Boys tend not to get autoimmune disease. It has to do with the fact that they're XY versus XX genetically, but that's another conversation. However, that is shifting. So we now have kids, autoimmune disease, it's on the rise. That's scary. Those are scary numbers.
And hypothyroidism in the mom is during pregnancy is linked to a 4-fold increased risk of autism in the child. So it's connected to autism.
And there's numerous studies connecting glyphosate to thyroid issues. And
yes.
I mean, it's not even questioned, I don't think, anymore.
Thyroid cancer is one of the cancers that's going up exactly in step with the rise in glyphosate usage on core crops.
And thyroid medication is the #1 medication given to women today. And what we should point out is that it's extremely profitable for Big Pharma, because once they give them the medication that basically wipes out the thyroid's ability to produce certain hormones, right? Then they have to take those. Is it hormones? Is it hormones that they have to take for the rest of their life
thyroid hormone? Yeah,
thyroid, in order to live. So it's very profitable
to
create a lifelong customer. Yeah, it's a lifelong customer, and also that #1 thyroid medication, which, by the way, I was prescribed for a little while. I had some thyroid issues. It causes depression. Within 3 days, I was in a dark place. I was like, I looked at the side effect. I was like, wait a sec. No, I am not taking this anymore. And I don't know exactly what I did, but I drank lots of green smoothies and I cleaned up my diet, and I no longer have to take thyroid medication.
That's
Like
excellent.
it's not necessary if you address diet in your gut.
And we would be remiss if we didn't mention here that mercury toxicity also affects the thyroid. It causes also thinning of the eyebrows. 1/3 of the eyebrow goes away. It could be thyroid. It could be mercury toxicity. And gluten causes thyroid toxicity because there's a similar receptor on the thyroid similar to gluten.
Right.
And my own thyroid test years ago, full disclosure, about 15 years ago, was bumping up. And I said, oh, no way. I'm not going there. I came off gluten and I was already eating an organic diet, more organic now. And my TSH went back to normal.
That might be part of what I did too. I also am gluten-free now, and I just feel
Yeah.
healthier and better. Yeah. I want to show an example of a school lunch in Japan. And this is something that I took when I went to Japan a couple years ago. In this image, you can see this is a nursery school essentially, and they have prawns from the Philippines that were not farm raised. They were wild caught, and they have seaweed in the soup, and they have noodles, and they have fresh vegetables, and they're made with some type of tempura vegetables. I mean, they have gourmet food essentially in nursery school in Japan. They eat real food.
I wonder how many American children would actually eat a lunch like that, right? They're
Oh, they would love it. It's what you're used to. I think it's so silly when people say like, oh, children will only eat chicken
our
nuggets
children.
and
They're
Chicken
trained.
nuggets
fries
and
and
pizza.
ketchup.
Yeah.
It's like,
They get trained to the point where they're very, very picky eaters, and
Yeah,
they
she
just
was
want
saying
their-
the American
In
American
America,
children would be probably
they
scared to
would
eat
probably
that.
they probably wouldn't eat that lunch, right? I think if you gave an average American kindergartner that lunch, they'd say no way, right? Don't you think?
They might refuse it, but if they tried it over time and if they grew food in their own garden, I mean,
Well, they need to get it from the get-go. I mean, you need to start out with the diet in such a way that they learn that these foods are nutritious and delicious. I mean, they just don't. They get stuck on these processed foods. It's so, all these little packages of processed foods that are so easy to just hand them. They open the little package, they eat it. I mean, these things are just way too easy. Today, American mothers, I think a lot of them buy these snacks that their kids just eat snacks, and they learn not to like the foods that are good for them, which is so strange to me.
Moms might be responsible there for our kids' taste, because what moms eat during pregnancy has been shown to affect what your kids will like. And if mom eats well and takes herbs and other things pregnancy, kids will prefer those foods. And if mom drinks alcohol during pregnancy, those infants and children will prefer alcohol. And there's great human data on that.
That's amazing.
Isn't that amazing? And also deficiencies such as zinc cause picky eating. So it becomes a vicious cycle. So you have nutritional deficiencies and from our kids' bad diets, and then they become picky eaters, and then moms are running around with a spoon in their hand trying to get the kid to eat something that's healthy.
And I think a problem too is the gut microbes, because if the gut microbes can't break down the cellulose, then you don't want to eat a lot of fiber. You can't eat fiber because the microbes can't break it down, and that's a problem too. Then you start to just say, I don't want fiber, you just want foods that are practically already digested,
Yeah, so they want to eat chicken nuggets, but they won't eat green beans.
Yes,
they don't want to eat the fiber. Yeah.
Well, there's a way around that too, and I say moms should cook, dads should cook soup, because when you break down the veggies in soups, and especially if you have a slow cooker and you've cooked them all day, not Instapot, slow cooking all day long retains more nutrients. You want to retain as many as you can. You'll break down the foods for kids, and they're not as nutritious, but can help them digest it better. I give that to stressed out parents all the time. I make them do slow cooking and help break down the foods, especially if you're stressed out. I mean, raw food is ideal. That is the most nutritious. And I tell every parent to get a bullet or a Vitamix or a blender or whatever you can get, and you can blend them. And then when you add things like coconut milk or pineapple, it makes everything taste good. And then you could add the greens and the good food. Raw is better. But you have to include somewhere onions in that kid's diet, because your microbes love inulin, and inulin is the fiber in onions. Not to mention has sulfur.
I did not know that. Well, I'm glad we're talking about solutions. I want to share. Can you see this image from Conscious Kitchen? So Conscious Kitchen is an organization that addresses food equity, education, and access to, healthy food by around the school food service. So this is a organization that was started in California, and I know Michelle, you can talk a little bit about this, West Contra Costa Unified School District. They got organic food in their schools locally, and actually was able to transform the school lunches into organic local foods. And this is primarily because they have a kitchen in their school, many of their schools, where they're able to produce the food. The kids are able to grow a lot of food. And it's, the first organic school district in the country, launched in 2013, which thrives to this day. So I just want people to know that there are schools that are doing something about the school lunches. But it is challenging because not every school district or school building has the ability to create food in their own kitchen. A lot of these schools have been stripped of even mixers or ovens or whatever. They just maybe reheat in a microwave, and they have shelves of processed foods. So that's why we at Moms Across America do ask people to contact the government, because the federal government has so much control over this school lunch system. It really must be addressed federally. And, because not every school has the capacity to address it locally. So, but Michelle, do you want to talk a little bit more about Conscious Kitchen and Turning Green?
I love Conscious Kitchen. I know the founder, Judy Shields, who started here in our county, and I know the school where it started, and Alice Waters got behind it, and they raised lots of money, and they brought in chefs from all over the Bay Area, these Michelin star chefs, to get the program going, and these kids were snarfing down that food. And what the one school they did here in area of our county that was a lower income area, those kids, that's where the garden was and the program was initiated. After 1 month, UCSF was studying these kids. After 1 month of changing their foods, attendance rates improved, and the teachers reported that the kids did better academically. 1 month. So then the program went over to the East Bay, which is in our region, and they had some problems with those folks who worked in the kitchens fighting Conscious Kitchen like unions. And getting these kitchens installed in these schools and doing it. They were blocked by workers who lived in the communities they were blocking. It was hard to wrap around of some of the obstacles they faced. But this program is a success. The garden recently needed more volunteers because it takes the parents to volunteer in the associated school gardens. But be clear, other institutions are doing this, like Rodale. A shout out to Rodale. I was just there last month. They are doing these programs with hospitals, St. Luke's, schools, CSA boxes for employees, for patients, bringing to the school system. So it's catching on. But every school now should have an organic garden, a kitchen. In France, they have kitchens in every school, and those kids sit down to like a 5-course meal with a cheese course. Like those kids are arguing over whether the brie or the Gruyere.
There's a movie you have to watch. It's called The Organic Food Revolution, the French Organic Food Revolution. And it's all about a small town called Barjac in southern France, where the mayor saw the pesticides being sprayed around their, neighborhood, and the kids' rates of cancer going up. And he said, wait a second, we're going to give our money, instead of giving our money from the region to the farmers who are spraying the pesticides, we're going to give it to the schools and say that money needs to go towards buying organic food. So then the school said to the farmers, we're only going to buy organic food, and created a market for organic food. And now the schools have organic food, and the farmers are not spraying the pesticides, and they have much healthier children. So there needs to be a shift in the marketplace, and we need to see some courage from politicians and leaders in facilitating that shift as well. I mean, we parents have, I think, the most power, and we can do something about it right now. But we want to see more action as well politically.
And this is all decided at the federal level, right? We have the Child Nutrition Act, and that sets the standard for what the nutrition guidelines are for federal school lunches, how much money each school gets per student for federal school lunches. So we need a campaign around this. So what are the next steps now for Moms Across America, going from this study that you've done, Zen?
Well, we are talking to senators right now about a bill being presented in the early of 2023. So that is a very strong possibility, if not a definite thing that's going to be happening. So we're very happy about that. We're going to be featured in a movie, so there'll be a docu-series coming out about school lunches with this information featured in there. And so we are a big fan of media and getting that out in the biggest way possible. We are also looking to test military food because we think we're going to find similar results. We have some moms with young people that are in the National Guard, and one young lady said 4 days. You know, I think she goes every month or every quarter to the National Guard, and for that 4-day weekend, she did not eat one thing that was green or alive. It was all packaged and in plastic bags and just heated up in a microwave. And we think that those foods might also contain high levels of phthalates and PFAS, which are found in the packaging. And so we would like to raise, it's a significant amount of money, but it's what needs to be done. And nobody else is doing it. Our government is not doing this. You know, doctors and hospitals and all that, they're busy treating the symptoms. You know, they're not looking at what the cause is. And so we want to look at what the cause is, and we want to stop this. We want to transform the food system. The Chinese military generals that I met in China when I went to China for, Stephanie was there, 2000, I think it was 15 food safety conference. I had Chinese generals come up to me and say that they do not feed their military GMOs. And that's not the case here in the United States. And I think we need to test the food for not only GMOs, but for pesticides and heavy metals and, you know, phthalates and all of these different packaging types of contaminants, because our military is being severely impacted. I mean, their health is terrible. We have a 44% capacity in the military. And that starts with the school lunches, right? Like there's actually been military generals in the US that said the school lunch issue is a national security issue because only 19% of the people who apply to be in the military, these young people, can actually get in. They're not healthy. Our children are not healthy enough to get into the military. So the military is at a 44% capacity right now, which leaves us as a weakened nation. And so when once they get in, their health is not great either. So it's something that we want to address going forward.
Yeah, Zen, your work is so inspiring. So how can people join in? I understand you have an organizing call on Monday nights. How do people join Moms Across America, and what are the ways that you have for folks to plug in?
Well, they go to momsacrossamerica.org and click on connect, and then sign up for the email. That's where you'll get our newsletter. You will get an invitation every Monday, sometimes around noon or 3 o'clock or something like that, to click on the link and join our Moms Connect call, which is at 7 p.m. Eastern time, 7 to 7:30. And then I also want to do a plug for Neighborhood Food Network, which is our 7:30 call. We just segue right into that from 7:30 to 8, sometimes even 8:30, where we have experts on that talk about growing food. And our Neighborhood Food Network is where you can create a neighborhood food network, on your street, to create local food security, health, and community, one street at a time. And we're talking about a parallel food system. So if you want to opt out of all this toxicity and all the stuff that Stephanie and Michelle just talked about, with all these chemicals impacting your gut bacteria and messing up your kids' ability to process food, and constipation and all these behavioral issues, if you want to opt out of that, start learning how to grow your own food and start connecting with your neighbors and experiencing the joy of growing too much food and then needing to share it, and learn how to preserve food and jam food and can it and all that kind of stuff. It's really fun. We have experts on, and they talk about how to grow food and what you need to be doing in your garden right now, and preparing for spring and preserving and all of that. It's a really fun call. We hope you'll join us.
And how about you, Dr. Pero and Dr. Senef? This is your brainchild, the new MDs, the moms, doctors, and scientists, and you're working with Regeneration Health International on these new campaigns. What's next for you? I hear James Lyons Weiler is going to host a discussion around this conversation that you've begun.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Thank you, Dr. Lyons-Weiler. We're looking forward to that. And 2 more plugs. One is what RHI, Regeneration Health International, is doing, is we are promoting material, but This has not been announced in our group yet. There will be a course coming soon that we're pairing with an organic farm to teach people directly the farm to eating method. It's a course that people will be able to take. I am presently working on it. Stephanie hasn't even heard about it yet, but gosh, just drop the bomb now, and it's going to be very exciting. And I hope to have my next book teaching parents how to regain their children's health back, empowering parents out by the end of 2023. If I can keep my tushy in a chair, making our children well. I'm really excited about those projects. Stephanie?
Wow.
It's just so great to be thinking about solutions rather than problems. I think it's just been such a nightmare. People can get completely overwhelmed with all the problems and just give up and be hopeless about it. Or they can just say, look, let's take a look. What can we do? Let's do it. And I think that's a great thing about Zen. She just says, let's do it. And then she motivates other people to do it too. And I think I want to really give a shout out to Zen for the work that she's doing.
Thank you,
Sure.
Stephanie. And we can't do it without your science and with doctors' support. And one other thing I want to say about doctors too is that our family members don't often listen to us. They listen to their doctors. So any healthcare providers out there, if you could please have the courage to speak up to your patients about organic food, saying to them, eat your fruits and vegetables is no longer accurate. You have to say, eat your organic fruits and vegetables. And the more doctors and healthcare providers that do that, the more that it will really improve our family's health. And that whole mental health issue that we were talking about, like that includes our brothers and our sisters and our, uncles and fathers and mothers. Like we need people to be eating organic food for sure. So thank you to all the healthcare providers out there that have the courage to speak up.
Yes. All right. Well, so exciting. Thank you, three, my heroes, for being here today. I hope everybody knows what you all do next. So we'll see you all next time. Thanks so much for watching.
Thank you. Bye.